There we go. Hi. Okay, we're live here. This is a session which is not really too structured. Basically, we're going to give you some of the experiences that we've had in the chapters. At the conference last year, we announced that we were beginning to form AMI chapters around the country. And the idea was to form local chapters which would then bring in membership, which would educate the populace on monetary reform, and then they would get to a position of enough confidence, expertise, and numbers to walk into the local congressman's office and to reach them. And it's been happening in several cities. The objective at the last conference was to have 12 chapters started this year. That was in October of 2005, that we would have 12 chapters going by the end of 2006. And we have learned that it's very difficult to start these chapters. Approximately 10 chapter testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No. This is for the court. Okay. Which one is working? One of these, okay, this one's working. Good, okay. The first chapter to get started was in Burlington, Iowa, with Dick Distelhorst here, who's been known in that area for decades as a monetary reformer, and who has a following there and used to hold regular meetings even before it became an AMI chapter. And Dick has been the most active chapter leader, with a meeting virtually every month, and with a lot of activity politically. And he's going to tell us some of the things that he's done there. The latest part that occurred with Dick was he managed to force or to get Senator Grassley of Iowa, who is a national senator in Washington, D.C., to call back and hold a conference call with Dick, myself, a handful of other people from Burlington, Iowa. And that, politically, that represents quite an achievement, to be able to get the attention of a senator. I don't know if you've ever tried. You try sometime, you'll find out it's almost impossible. It's getting more and more difficult to get the attention of a congressman, let alone a senator. And yet he was able to do that. And he's going to tell us how he operates, basically. I went to Boston to start up a chapter with Larry Mulcahy, doctor now, who just got his doctorate in biochemistry, like Frederick Soddy. and Larry set up a meeting with the United for a Fair Economy group out of Boston, which is a group that somehow has managed to get $2 million in funding per year, and they seek grants. They're very active politically. We got a chance to speak with them, and from there, what has happened is that their magazine has published a short piece by me on Monetary Transparency Act, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. They're publishing a longer piece next month on, is the Fed private or public? So that's something that's moving. We have not yet gotten active chapter members in Boston, but with this type of reaction, that's the next step. What I've found so far is that where the chapter leader is a younger person, they don't have all of the contacts and all of the established relations yet that the people who've been in the community active for a long time, such as Dick or Robert Poteat in the Northwest have. Went up to Maine to launch a chapter up there. And what I found up there was that the 9/11 movement is a major distraction to people. It's taking energy, it's taking their attention, and they're getting involved in. I don't see where it's going yet. Now, I'd like to see more knowledge come out about that, and that's great. But so far, I've seen it as be careful, learn how to gather evidence for real. So. Not much has happened out of there, and I don't know if it will. One of the tests is whether the people will come to these meetings, because if they're not motivated enough to come together once a year, then it's hard to gauge results. It's one way to gauge it. Up in the Northwest, Robert Poteat is in charge of 3 chapters: Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, and Centralia, which is a small town in the middle of Washington State. And we had rather good results there in Portland, and we have with us people from Portland, Dale Beech and Ron Miller, right? And I think about 15, 20 people got together for that meeting, and you have scheduled additional meetings since then. And you can tell us, what your impression is. But again, Bob has strong relations with people in the area. One group we talked to, he's a member of the Democratic Party group there. And as I mentioned yesterday, they took monetary reform as a principle onto their national convention, their state convention of the Washington Democrats. Matt Hagel has been meeting with us in the Chicago area. We have a chapter that's met about 5 or 6 times so far in the Chicago area. And the challenge is to bring and find new members. It's not as easy as one thinks. I'm thinking that by the end of this year, we'll probably have 6 or 7 chapters that are actively operating. There are some people here now who want to start. There's one fellow that would like to begin one in Kansas City, and I think a couple of other places. So I'm not going to just leave the meeting open to the chapter. Stephen Walsh with our Chicago chapter also has been a big help. Where do these things lead? You never know. As I said, somebody asked me, what's your plan? And the plan is to move forward. It's very general, but that kind of plan can work. And the plan becomes defined more and more as you do move forward. Stephen, for example, set up a meeting with the Quakers, a group of leading Quakers here in Chicago. They had a convention, a seminar, I guess it was, or a sabbatical here in Chicago, and we get a chance to address them. And that is going to resonate over time in the Quaker organization, and I think things will happen there. One of the fascinating things about the Quakers, they set goals, and then they move towards them, and they're organized on a national basis. And they had Stephen explained to me that they had 3 principles this year. That they do this every year. That the 3 points that they were focusing on this year, point number 1 was economics as violence, which is really fascinating to be able to understand that. And if they can carry forward with that theme, that economics is not just a dry science, but it's clear from Ben's talk, the degree of violence that is being expressed, that it's being used as a club to beat down victims in a kind of class. Not quite. It's not a class war. It's not classes, but it's something along those lines. Culture, okay. Plutocratic. The other 2 points that the Quakers were doing, that they have to have more activity in Washington, D.C., and I forgot what the third point was. It wasn't on the monetary thing. Okay. So, okay, I think at this point, Dick, would you like to? Dick has prepared a sheet telling you about what he does and how it's worked out and what's working and what's not.
I also decided that I'm allergic to that podium after yesterday. And before I get into chapter meetings, I've had several people today ask me for the website of the Federal Reserve for that L1 total credit market debt location on the internet. So I'm going to read it to you twice, and if you want it to so that you can see it on the internet and review all the stuff that's on there, here it is. www.federalreserve, that's all one word, no space, .gov, that's G-O-V, of course, /releases, /Z1, /current, the word current, / that's it. www.federalreserve, all one word, .gov/releases /Z1 /current /. And as I said, you have to page down something around 130 times to find that L1 total credit market report, and you'll find a lot of other interesting things there. Okay, now to get to the chapter, I did have a running start, as Stephen mentioned, because I already had a group that were meeting, and at one point we were working with Kenny on some things too, Kenny Bonsack, that is, on the sovereignty proposal. So I had a newsletter that I started my chapter in Burlington November the 1st of last year. At that time, I had a monthly newsletter that I was sending out, and I had roughly 250 email addresses that I sent it to. It's now up to 380 after 11 chapter meetings, so it's growing. And that's the first thing I recommend to anybody that starts the chapter. Get all the email addresses you can find from anybody that comes or even expresses interest when you're talking to them, and get their phone numbers. And keep this list, because at the time that we need support in Congress for legislation, when we do get it there, then you know who to call and who to email to get a groundswell of support. And that's one of the big things we're trying to do now, both educate people and get them to where they will support us when we ask for support at the congressional level. We're also trying to educate our members of Congress, and Stephen talked a little bit about that, and it takes some doing to get to talk to them. One other thing, when you send out your newsletter, use the blind carbon copy function in your email so that you don't send out your email address list of everybody that gets your newsletter. I guess everybody knows how to do that. If you don't, why, it's easy to find out. I'm not going to try and explain it while I'm here. So I think a monthly newsletter is very important. Also, even though you send out a newsletter, and my meetings are on the first Tuesday of every month, and I usually send out the monthly newsletter the Friday before the Tuesday meeting, so with the theory that over the weekend they might read it. But then you can't depend on just the email. If you have those phone numbers, make personal phone calls and personally invite them to the meeting and remind them of it. The 2 times that I didn't do that, my attendance dropped from I've had a high of 23 at a meeting and a low of 8 twice, and the 2 times I had the low of 8 is when I didn't make the personal phone calls. It'll seem to you like you're bothering a lot of people, but they only get 1 phone call, so it's not bad on their end. And at the first meeting particularly, and it's good anytime, I tried to invite to the meeting those people that I considered to be movers and shakers in the city, like elected officials, the city council, the board of supervisors, the school board, the community college board, businessmen. I invited the CEOs of the 3 largest banks in town. For some reason, they've never attended a meeting. I've invited the editors, and that's important too. Get to know your city news editor and the managing editor and the general editor, because if you know them and you talk with them and they begin to understand that you have a real issue here, they will do a lot of good for you. I also invited members of the staff of Senator Harkin, Senator Grassley, and Congressman Leach. None of them attended either, but at least they were invited. And on press releases, if you keep in contact with your editors of your newspaper and also with your local radio stations, you can get good press releases more frequently. You can go on talk shows. I have a talk show that I go on about every 60 days, and the moderator of the talk show is totally with us on the issue now that he's understood it, since he and I have been talking. And letters to the editor are very powerful and a very good tool, and they don't cost you anything. And also, since we are a 501c3 corporation, most newspapers will give you announcements of your meetings at no charge. It's not a big announcement, but it's in the paper. In our case, they have a column called Hawkeye Happenings, and it's just notices of covered dish suppers and meetings and what have you. And if you're a nonprofit organization, why, it's free for one time. If you want more than one, then you have to pay for them. So those are good tools. At the meeting itself, I think you should have a prepared agenda before the meeting. You don't have to always follow it, but just don't depend on going where the flow goes, because that doesn't work very well in my experience. And I think at every meeting you should have some handouts. They can just be 1 or 2 pages long, just something that you want them to take with them and read later. The hardest thing is to make the meetings interesting after you've explained the monetary problems so many times. They don't want to come back again, and that's not totally true. Some people come back every time, but you have to work at making the meetings interesting, because our goals is to get as many people informed as we can, and you have to tell them how they can help, what they can do, and use those tools like any videos you got. I just bought 2 videos here today that I'll be showing at the next meetings. And I'm looking all the time for videos that are good and relate to our issue and don't disagree with us. And they're not that easy to find, but they're out there. And I've also had guests at the meeting. I've had an economist that came. He was just retiring. I was teaching economics at the college in town, and he agreed to come. I'm the treasurer of the Democratic Party in Burlington, Iowa, and he's the secretary, so we were fairly close friends anyhow. And he did agree to come and have an informal debate on monetary reform. And when he left, his mind hadn't been changed, because his brain has been scrambled too. But we still had a good discussion, and we finally did get him to agree that there was no way to put money into circulation without increasing our debt. And in one night, I figured that was about as much of a success as we could have with him. And I mentioned earlier that Modern Money Mechanics booklet from the Federal Reserve here in Chicago, and how to Google it. And the main thing I use that for, when somebody new is there and says, well, that can't be right, banks can't just create money out of thin air. You can open up the Federal Reserve Bank's own book, and on page 3 it says who creates our money, and it says most of our money is created by private banks. So then you get some validity to what you're saying. And the main thing is, don't just tell them about all the problems we have, that our debt is increasing greatly, some of the things I showed yesterday, don't just give them problems, also give them benefits. What's it going to do if we correct this system? How will you be better off personally? That's what they want to hear. And I also want to, right now, if you would like to have, and you can tell me what you want to have, write down your email address on one of the pages in your booklets there, and your name, and what you would like. If you would like a copy of what I said yesterday, or if you'd like a copy of my handouts for the first meeting, or if you want the agenda for my first meeting, or anything that you want that I've done, it's available to you if you give me your email address. When I get home, I'll send you what you asked for. So sometime before I leave, or before the end of the conference, if you would like to participate that way, please do so. And also, if you would like to receive the free monthly newsletter, give me your email and ask for that. The monthly newsletter, the first half of it, generally speaking, is about monetary reform, and the second half of it is political, and since I'm a Democrat, you know who I'm talking against most of the time. But it expresses my views and sometimes the views of others. I have here a copy of my first handout, but I only brought one. I didn't have room to carry a bunch of them, but if anybody's interested in looking at it, I do have it available. And I'm just about done, Stephen, but I just wanted to touch on this issue that you mentioned on trying to get Senator Grassley, Senator Harkin, and Congressman Beech to come and talk to us for an hour. And a year ago, in November of 2005, I went to a work session of the Burlington City Council. And again, I had the advantage, I've been there many times before, they know who I am, they know I'm not some kind of a nut just making up stuff out of thin air. And I asked the City Council if they would send a letter, which I had already written and brought to them, so they didn't have to write the letter, they only had to copy it. You got to make it as easy for them as you can. Which would ask Senator Harkin, Senator Grassley, and Congressman Leach, each in a separate letter, to come to Burlington when they had the opportunity and were in the southeast Iowa area, and schedule an hour minimum to talk about monetary reform and the American Monetary Act in the City Council chambers with the mayor and the City Council, myself, and other members of the public. That was in November of 2005. December the 2nd, 2005, such letters went out from the City Council, signed by the mayor. 2 months later, in February, we had no response from anyone. I went to the Hawkeye, our local newspaper, and talked to the managing editor, told him the situation, and he put a reporter on it, and she called Grassley's office, Leach's office, and Harkin's office, and asked them why they had not responded to that letter from the mayor and the City Council. And all three offices denied ever receiving such a letter. But they said they would be happy to come and talk to us. That was in February. This is the end of September. They still haven't come. We did get to one call Stephen mentioned from Senator Grassley, which was a small step forward. I had just got an email this Wednesday from Congressman Leach's office, and it says, I have spoken with the congressman about your request, and he would be happy to meet with you in his Burlington office before the end of the year. But I don't have any dates. They say they'll keep me updated. And you notice he didn't say he'd come to the City Council and meet with the City Council and members of the public. He just mentioned me only, but I'll work on that when I hear from him. They keep putting these things off. Senator Harkin's office, to his credit, did send a member of his staff from the Davenport, Iowa office, and I talked to her and gave her copies of the American Monetary Act, the latest version that we have, and some other handouts, and she did forward them to Senator Harkin's office in Washington, but I have still not got a commitment from the senator, either of my senators, and this is as much of a commitment as I have from Jim Leach, who is our congressman. I don't have a lot of hope talking with Jim Leach. I've talked to him about monetary reform 30 years ago. He's a banker, for one thing. He made his millions in banking. He's also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and I don't expect to convince him much of anything, but I hope to have the issue discussed with him, with members of the City Council and members of the public present, because it'll educate them. So that's how hard it is to do that. And I also have with me copies of a number of pages from the Burlington Hawkeye. The one I'm looking at, the headline says it's all about money, and it gives an article about what we're trying to do. It spells out that we want to nationalize the Federal Reserve banks, eliminate fractional reserve banking, return the power to create, regulate, and issue money to the government, and rebuild the public infrastructure. They'll give you some good write-ups if you basically give them what to write. That's just the way it works. So that's a fast rundown of where I am and what we're doing. Right now, the hard part is finding ways to make the meetings more entertaining, and I certainly appreciate the presentations that are on videos that I could buy, or DVDs that I could buy today. And with that, I'll turn it back to Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dick. It was interesting with Jim Leach. I think Dick is right. It's going to be very difficult to get him to move on this or to look at it carefully. But we did manage at one point. Dick had scheduled one meeting for me when I drove through Iowa, and we met at a local restaurant, and about 12 people were there. And as we were finishing up, Jim Leach's legislative assistant, or what was her title, Dick? She's in charge of his office there.
The local office, Sue Zimmerman.
In charge of Jim Leach's local office. He's very powerful as a congressman, by the way. Came by and she saw our meeting. And when she saw Dick, she knew exactly what the meeting was about. So I'm certain that got back to his office eventually, because they do watch what's happening. This one work? Is that on? It's not on yet. Not on yet. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Anyway, I'm sure word got back to Leach about that meeting in his district. And Ken pointed out to us, in all of his experience with sovereignty, that 6 letters from a district, 6 is the number you gave, I don't know if, well, that puts you on their map. That puts you on their agenda. 6 real letters, not photocopies generated by some process, not just emails, but 6 actual letters from citizens. We too often accept the idea that we can't change the system, but normally it's people who aren't trying at all to change the system who have that opinion. We'll try, and we see results. And we know this is not going to be an easy process. If it were, it would have already been done. But we'll work on it, and we'll find the methods that work. And Dick has pioneered many of them, and they work. Now I'm going to pass the microphone to Robert Poteat, who, by the way, is also involved, as Dick is, in serious anti-war activities in his area. And one of the groups we talked to was connected with that. You may not be aware, but Bob has been involved in monetary reform also for a long, long time. What, 20 years? Roughly. Okay, so he knows the terrain too.
Well, I think Dick set the standard for what we need to do, so I don't have anything to add to that. And in terms of my own history, my partner and I found out quite some time ago that you almost have to have the panache of an organization. If you go to a group or somebody else and try to talk as yourself, you just don't go anywhere. So we formed a group. It was only a group of 2, but the name sometimes got us into places we otherwise couldn't get into. And the anecdotes I told yesterday about the Libertarians and the Peace Group. Those are true. I didn't make those up. There's a great deal of frustration in talking to people when they simply do not believe what you're saying. So that's how I came to rely on modern money mechanics. If you don't believe this, then there's not much I can tell you. In terms of getting chapter groups going on the West Coast there in the Northwest, basically it was Steve who got on radio and on talk shows got people interested. And then my own personal contacts in Centralia and Olympia. I had become quite discouraged with the whole thing, and my partner had passed away, and I was considering just chucking it. And
Mention her name so people may know.
is what?
You mentioned her name, some people may have heard her.
Well, her name was Muriel Mobley. You may have seen her name on the website. At one time, we wrote articles and published in the old Spotlight too. Steve wrote his book, and I'd known about his website for a long time, and I'm not sure if we had exchanged emails or anything. I don't know. I thought, well, this guy knows what he's talking about. This is good. But then he wrote the book, and I got the book, and I read it. Well, this really is good. And then he announced the convention, so I came last year and got going again. So I'm back in the game.
I'll just introduce this gentleman. This is Dale Beech, and Dale was at our conference last year, and he told us the story of how his father would read, instead of reading bedtime stories to the kids, he'd read to them about monetary reform. And Dale's been doing the same, did the same with his kid. We're trying to get him into one of these meetings.
Well, I know I don't look it, but I do go back to the Great Depression, and that's where my father decided there had to be monetary reform, so I kind of grew up with that. But I just wanted to say about anybody who's interested in forming a chapter in their particular community, I'd like to suggest, well, none of us have extra money, I'm sure of that. So you can spend a lot of money renting a hotel room as a meeting room. You can do that, but there's a lot of other meeting rooms that are available that are free of charge. Check with your library, the city library. That's where we hold our meetings. I think you can also check with the community center, or maybe even some churches that would provide a meeting room. So I say that you're foolish if you spend money needlessly for a meeting room, because none of us have extra money. That's my suggestion. And thank you.
Thank you. When I give you comments, you're welcome anytime, but you don't have to. No. Oh.
I've had the pleasure to work with Steve last year, just learned an incredible amount of information about all this. I meet a lot of people during my daily life, and anyone from corporate executives to bankers, people that work in accounting. This is not my field of expertise, but I think I can share the frustration of trying to explain what the problem is, and just getting blank stares and blank wall, just like you're meeting a wall. If the issue is global warming, most people, in 2 sentences you can describe that, there's carbon gases building up in the atmosphere, and if we keep on producing it, it's going to cause temperature to rise. I mean, it's simple, two sentences and you're done. But you start talking about monetary reform, and you're looking at a 2 or 3 hour conversation, just to get people, into the topic if they're still awake by the end of the 3 hours. But at the same time, of all the issues I've thought about, in my life, this has been one of the most important ones, because it seems to be connected to so many things. So I think what I like about this group, and what I like about our chapter, is the passion that we all have for truly making a difference in an area of reality that really affects most of the lives of all the people on this planet. So I think it's just, something that's going to take time for us to, get that passion, arised in people, and to get them really to care about these issues and understand it. So, thank you.
Thank you. You don't have to. No, this is Ron Miller. Portland.
I think that probably like a large number of us in here, I come from a different background, group with different interests, and I come from a background from Technocracy Incorporated. We were more or less opposed to the price system altogether. But what I really like that applies to this is that the founder of our organization was an engineer by the name of Howard Scott. And at one point he said that, that the rate of social consciousness increases in direct proportion to the approach of the stomach to the spine. And that's pretty much exactly the case. People don't begin to move until they begin to feel the pain themselves. And I think that is basically what we'll find here. Also, I've read Stephen's book cover to cover, and I highly recommend that to anybody who really wants to really understand how the financial system really works. Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you, Ron. Again, it's not going to be easy, but if you have felt a particular type of camaraderie with the other people that have come to this meeting, and we felt that same thing last year, the same feeling comes through in our chapter meetings. So these are people that one feels comfortable with. That's so important. If we're gonna have a lot of work to do in this, we're going to have a good time doing it. That's really important. And I'll do what we can. Oh, the modern money mechanics is now here. That's the chart that we're talking about. Several people have mentioned on how money is created, and this is quoted directly from the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. So we've got that now in this brochure that's going to be, I'm thinking, an important teaching tool explaining the American Monetary Act and so on. Now, last year, I put forward the idea that if everybody brings in one person, if over the next 12 months, each of you is able to just convince one person to come in to one of these meetings, that this group will double, more than double, because some of the people who were here last year are not here now because they want to come every 2 years. That type of thing is happening too. That's an approach that's within our power. It's an approach we don't have to pay money to advertise for. We don't have to pay money ultimately to the banking establishment to do it that way. It's something we can all do, but it takes effort. But you've got 12 months. And by the way, if we do it in that way, we can charge less and less of a registration donation to come in here, because it's easier to hold these conferences. So again, please focus on that as a possibility this year. I think, anybody else want to say something?
Stephen, can I add one thing? It just occurred to me when someone just said that it's so difficult to get the concept of money being debt instead of money being spent into circulation. And one way that I've found with new people that at least gets their attention and they seem to understand it is almost everybody, and probably everybody in this room at one time or more in your life, you've played the game Monopoly. And you can use that for an analogy in this way. When the game starts, the banker gives every player $1,500. That's like the government spending money into circulation. And each time a player passes go, they get $200. That's again like the government spending money into circulation. Now think about the game if the banker lent the money into circulation instead of the government spending it into circulation. When you got your first $1,500, you would owe it to the bank with maybe a 10% interest charge. And each time you went around go, you got $200, but it was a loan with a 10% interest charge. And each time you passed go, the banker collected the interest. Now in that game, who's going to win? did.
My name is Stephen Walsh, and just a comment or two. I grew up in Chicago and always had an interest in politics. My father ran for alderman and was busy and active, and I went away to school, and I was a political science major and had to take some economics, and I read Hal Bronner's The Worldly Philosophers, and I would think about 19th century political economy, and it came to 20th century, and economics was the dismal science. And so I left it. So I spent 30 years in education, and I had a background in anthropology, and I've taught in many different places. I've taught in Eskimo communities, in small towns, and in big cities. But I was always observing, and I was always like a resource teacher in the classroom. I developed some expertise in certain areas, math and science, and I've been helping out classrooms quite a bit and working in that direction. And with some friends, about 13 months ago, they found out about the conference, and I called Steve and read his book, a chapter a day, if you can do it. But even though I'm a slow reader, I did it. And I've been absorbing, I see many faces in this room. I've been absorbing quite a bit of what you've been saying and doing. And if we had the knowledge together, the knowledge in this room would be like a laser light or a magnet. It would have such an aura that it would maybe make the change. And so I see us self-organizing and doing great things. But I'm going to come up with a question now for everybody. One of the things I've done is, since I would work in curriculum, I worked on 6th, 7th, and 8th grade curriculum, developing curriculum using some technology and on the internet to come up with questions, problem-based learning and project-based learning questions to get students involved in this field. And what is the K-12 curriculum? What should students know at every year, kindergarten through 12th grade, that's ongoing as part of their good economics or home economics or good citizenship economics, so that they come away thinking. So I've been working the last some months. So I've been in this direction. But where I'm finding with our chapter meeting too is, like Dick is having a meeting a month, and I think that would be a really great goal for our Chicago chapter. We talked about it, but getting together and where we find ourselves is just wanting to learn. I don't have the background that Dick has, and I learned an awful lot from his presentation yesterday about what would this world look like after the AMI Act. And I'm learning, but it's that dialogue between everybody in this room, putting it together, and I got my notes, so I'm taking notes. Thank you.
We're going to use those notes also. Bob Poteat's going to say just a word or two, and then we're going on to Mr. David Kelly.
And on the subject of politics, I went to my county caucus, and by unanimous vote of one, elected myself chairman. And so I ran for PCO in the election that took place on the 19th, but I haven't got back to see if I won yet. I was unopposed, but then I heard that some woman was launching a write-in campaign, so I may not have won. But for years I stood and said, ooh, politics. But when you go there and you find there's nobody there, what kind of a democracy is it? So I have to assume some responsibility now. And if you are in one of these areas where there's nobody there, please go.
We're going to give a report on this again next year. Now, chapter launching meetings have been held in Boston, in Orono, Maine, in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, in, well, of course, Chicago, we're launched. We're looking forward to some in San Francisco, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Kansas City, I mentioned. There are people in these places that are interested to start, and I'll be working on that this year. And then it's a question of developing the systems that work. Well, thank you, gentlemen. And we'll move on now with the next speaker.